Right now at 4:30, today marks 2 years since the Capitol riots in Washington when supporters of former President Donald Trump stormed the building.
They were protesting the results of the 2020 election, but those protests became violent, even deadly. And there were people from Connecticut inside the Capitol.
Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Dylan Fearon is joining us right now, breaking it all down. Dylan.
Well, guys, we know 7 people from our state were charged after the January 6th riots. 5 of them, according to court documents, were inside the Capitol. Over the last 2 years, some have pled guilty, been sentenced, and we wanted to update you on their cases.
I'm just a regular person like everybody else here. In my building.
That's Patrick McCaughey III. When he was charged with assault after the January 6th riots, he was living in Ridgefield, caught on camera in D.C., pushing up against a police officer using a riot shield. The officer is being crushed, and the Justice Department said McCaughey and a group assaulted him. McCaughey was found guilty of 9 charges in September.
Jesus Christ, we invoke your name.
Taking part in that prayer inside the Senate chamber was Richard Crosby Jr. from Harwinton. Feds charged him with obstruction of Congress and disorderly conduct. He was arrested in June of 2021, pled not guilty a month later, but he did sign an affidavit saying he was inside the chamber. His file hasn't been updated since. 3 other people from Connecticut have pled guilty, including a mother and daughter from Canterbury. Carla Krzyzewicki and her mother, Jean Lavin, admitted to climbing a bike rack, entering the Capitol, snapping a few photos, and staying inside for just under an hour. Both mother and daughter were sentenced last April to 36 months probation. Lavin received 2 months home confinement, Krzyzewicki 3 months. Jeremy Bausch from New London County pled guilty in August, admitting he led chants and was inside the Capitol for 15 minutes. 2 years later, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who was there that day, relives what happened.
We could hear the sounds of the attack, the sights of the insurrection through the windows, the mob carrying pipes and bats.
Remain safe, become even safer. He has some ideas, which include new voting machines in Connecticut and protections for election workers, punishments for people who intimidate and harass them. We'll talk about that at 5:30. Live in the studio, Dylan Fearon, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.